The most important woman in the room was the one nobody bothered to notice. Snow drifted softly beyond the towering windows of Blackthorn Palace as hundreds of guests arrived for the Winter Sovereign Gala, the most prestigious social event in the kingdom. Crystal chandeliers cast warm golden light across polished marble floors. A string quartet played near the grand staircase. Laughter floated through the enormous ballroom like music of its own. Noble families gathered beneath banners embroidered with silver wolves, exchanging greetings, compliments, and carefully disguised judgments. It was a night where appearances mattered more than truth, where reputation could open every door or close them forever. Emily Harper stood quietly near the entrance, smoothing a small wrinkle from the sleeve of her dark blue evening dress. Compared to the extravagant gowns surrounding her, her clothing appeared almost modest. She preferred it that way. Simplicity had always made her feel comfortable. Around her neck hung a delicate silver necklace hidden beneath the fabric. More importantly, beneath the elegant gloves covering her hands rested something no one in the ballroom could see. Her wedding ring. Emily glanced toward the enormous clock above the far balcony. 7:15. She smiled softly to herself. Alexander would be arriving later than the other guests. Royal obligations often delayed him. She was used to it. Most people imagined being married to the Alpha King meant living inside a fairy tale. The truth was much quieter. Shared breakfasts whenever schedules allowed. Long conversations after midnight. Letters left on desks when responsibilities pulled them apart. She treasured those ordinary moments more than grand ceremonies. Yet tonight she had chosen to attend alone. Very few people knew the truth about her marriage. Alexander had offered to announce it publicly months ago. Emily had asked him not to. She wanted to be valued for who she was, not because of the title attached to his name. So the secret remained between them and a small circle of trusted advisors. The decision had never caused problems before. At least not yet. Emily stepped deeper into the ballroom. Servers carried silver trays filled with sparkling drinks. Noble women admired each other's jewelry while pretending not to compare prices. Young heirs discussed family influence and future opportunities. Everywhere she looked, people seemed busy performing versions of themselves. She moved carefully through the crowd, offering polite smiles whenever someone made eye contact. Most guests barely noticed her. A few nodded courteously. Many looked straight past her. Emily did not mind. Years earlier, that kind of treatment might have hurt. Life had taught her patience. She knew that attention was not the same thing as respect. Near the center of the ballroom, several young noblewomen stood gathered beside a fountain decorated with winter roses. One of them glanced toward Emily. Then another followed her gaze. Their conversation paused briefly. Emily noticed the look immediately. Not hostility. Curiosity. The kind that often appeared before assumptions. She continued walking. Behind her, whispers began. She could not hear every word. She did not need to. The pattern felt familiar. Who is she? Which family invited her? Is she important? Does anyone know her? Emily reached a table near the windows and accepted a glass of sparkling water from a server. Outside, snowflakes drifted through the darkness beyond the palace grounds. The sight calmed her. For a moment, she simply enjoyed the peaceful view. Somewhere above the ballroom, hidden behind ornate architecture and private corridors, royal security teams prepared for the Alpha King's arrival. Advisors reviewed schedules. Staff adjusted seating arrangements. The palace moved like a living machine. None of it reached Emily. She remained exactly where she preferred to be. Quiet. Unnoticed. Comfortable. Across the room, however, not everyone shared that opinion. Several guests had begun paying closer attention. Not because Emily had done anything remarkable. Quite the opposite. In a room overflowing with wealth, status, and ambition, her calm confidence felt unusual. She did not seem eager to impress anyone. She did not chase conversations. She did not compete for attention. The absence of desperation made people curious. Sometimes curiosity became admiration. Sometimes it became suspicion. Emily lifted her glass and looked once more toward the grand entrance. A faint smile touched her lips. She had no idea that before the night ended, every person in the ballroom would know exactly who she was. She had no idea that whispers would soon become silence. And she certainly had no idea that somewhere beyond the palace gates, a black royal motorcade had already begun its approach through the falling snow, carrying the one man capable of changing the entire evening with a single sentence. Emily Harper remained near the window as the ballroom slowly grew louder around her. Snow continued drifting beyond the glass, while warm golden light reflected across polished marble floors. The orchestra transitioned into another elegant piece, and more guests filled the center of the room. Everywhere she looked, conversations unfolded in carefully measured smiles and polite laughter. Yet beneath the glamour, she could feel something else moving through the crowd. Attention, curiosity, quiet judgment. She had attended enough formal gatherings to recognize it. The whispers that began near the fountain had not disappeared. They had spread. A woman in an emerald gown glanced toward Emily before leaning closer to her companions. Another nobleman followed her gaze. Soon several small groups seemed to be discussing the same subject. Emily. She pretended not to notice. Instead, she focused on the snowfall outside. The peaceful view reminded her of quieter evenings spent with Alexander away from royal duties. Those moments felt far more valuable than any grand event. Nearby, a server offered her another glass of sparkling water. She thanked him with a warm smile. The young man seemed surprised by her kindness. Many guests treated palace staff as if they were invisible. Emily never did. Across the ballroom, a cluster of young noblewomen continued observing her. "Do you know who she is?" one asked softly. Another shook her head. No family crest. No famous surname. No royal introduction. A third woman adjusted a diamond bracelet and frowned. Then how did she receive an invitation? Their questions carried no answers. Only assumptions. Emily eventually stepped away from the window and wandered toward a display of winter roses arranged beneath a crystal chandelier. The flowers were breathtaking. White petals shimmered beneath the light like fresh snow. She bent slightly to admire them. A familiar comfort settled over her. Flowers never cared about status. They never judged appearances. They simply bloomed. A faint smile touched her lips. Not far away, several guests noticed. One elderly noblewoman watched quietly before turning to her husband. "That young woman seems different from the others." "How so?" he asked. "She looks comfortable being herself." The man followed Emily with his eyes for a moment before nodding. "That is rare in this room." Meanwhile, the whispers continued growing. Some guests speculated she might be a distant relative of a lesser house. Others assumed she was accompanying an important guest who had not yet arrived. A few simply dismissed her altogether. Emily remained unaware of most of it. Or perhaps she simply chose not to care. Near the center of the ballroom, a group of influential heirs entered together, immediately drawing attention. Their expensive suits, confident laughter, and famous family names made them impossible to ignore. Among them stood Nathan Sterling. Tall, handsome, and accustomed to admiration, Nathan carried himself with the effortless confidence of someone who had rarely been challenged. Several guests greeted him immediately. Others stepped aside to make room. Nathan accepted the attention as naturally as breathing. As he exchanged greetings, his eyes moved across the ballroom. Eventually, they settled on Emily. He frowned slightly. "Who is she?" One of his companions followed his gaze. "No idea." Another shrugged. "Someone's guest, probably." Nathan continued watching. Emily stood alone beside the roses, calm and composed despite being surrounded by strangers. Something about her confidence irritated him. He was used to people seeking approval. She appeared interested in none of it. At that moment, if you are enjoying this story, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss more unforgettable stories ahead. Back in the ballroom, Emily turned away from the flowers and began walking toward another section of the hall. As she passed several groups, conversations briefly paused. Eyes followed her. Some curious, some skeptical, some openly dismissive. Yet she kept moving with quiet grace. She neither hurried nor slowed her pace. The reaction only seemed to deepen Nathan's interest. "I am going to find out who she is," he said casually. His friends exchanged amused smiles. "Good luck." Nathan adjusted his cufflinks and started toward her. Across the ballroom, a palace attendant quietly approached one of the senior advisors. "The royal motorcade has entered the palace grounds." The advisor nodded immediately. "Prepare for His Majesty's arrival." Above them all, hidden behind private corridors and secured entrances, final preparations were already underway. The Alpha King was only minutes away. Emily did not know it. Nathan did not know it. Most of the ballroom remained unaware. But destiny was moving steadily toward them through the falling snow, and before the night ended, every whispered assumption inside Blackthorn Palace would be tested against the truth. Nathan Sterling crossed the ballroom with the easy confidence of someone who had spent his entire life being welcomed wherever he went. Conversations opened around him. Guests smiled before he even reached them. Several young nobles stepped aside to let him pass. He acknowledged them with casual nods, never slowing his pace. His attention remained fixed on the woman standing near the winter rose display. Emily Harper had moved to a quieter corner beside a row of tall windows overlooking the snow-covered gardens. She held a glass of sparkling water in one hand while watching the falling snow beyond the glass. The scene looked peaceful, almost too peaceful for a room filled with ambition and social competition. Nathan stopped several feet away and studied her for a moment. She did not immediately notice him. That alone felt unusual. Most people recognized him instantly. Most people adjusted their behavior accordingly. Emily continued looking outside until she sensed someone nearby. Turning slightly, she found Nathan standing there. "Good evening," he said with a practiced smile. Emily returned a polite smile of her own. "Good evening." Nathan waited. Usually introductions followed naturally. Compliments. Recognition. Interest. Instead, Emily simply sipped her drink and looked back toward the gardens. A faint crease appeared between his eyebrows. "Enjoying the party?" he asked. "It is beautiful," Emily replied honestly. "The decorations are remarkable." Nathan glanced around. "The palace staff did excellent work this year." "They certainly did." Her answer carried genuine warmth. Nathan noticed it immediately. She sounded as though she appreciated the effort rather than the prestige. Another unusual detail. "I do not believe we have met before," he said. "I am Nathan Sterling." "Emily Harper." Her voice remained calm and friendly. Nathan waited again. No recognition followed. No reaction. No sudden interest. Just quiet politeness. Around them, several nearby guests had begun paying attention. Small conversations slowed. Curious eyes drifted in their direction. Nathan was accustomed to being the center of attention. Emily seemed completely unaware of it. "Harper," Nathan repeated. "Which Harper family?" Emily smiled gently. "Just Harper." A few listeners exchanged subtle glances. Nathan tilted his head. "There are many families represented here tonight. I assumed you belonged to one of them." "I do not." "Interesting." The single word sounded pleasant enough. Yet something beneath it had changed. Emily noticed. She had encountered similar conversations before. Questions disguised as friendliness. Curiosity slowly transforming into evaluation. Nathan looked around the ballroom before returning his attention to her. "Then how did you receive an invitation?" Emily took another sip of water. "I was invited." Several nearby guests suppressed amused smiles. Nathan's expression remained courteous, but his eyes sharpened. "By whom?" Emily could have answered. The truth sat comfortably on her finger beneath the glove she wore. Yet she had promised Alexander she would keep their private life protected until they decided otherwise. "A friend," she said. Nathan laughed softly. Not cruelly. Not yet. "A very influential friend, apparently." Emily merely smiled. The response seemed to frustrate him more than any argument could have. Most people rushed to prove themselves in rooms like this. Emily did the opposite. She offered no credentials, no explanations, no attempt to impress anyone. Around them, more guests quietly gathered within listening distance. The ballroom remained lively, But a small circle of curiosity had begun forming. Nathan sensed the audience. "Forgive my curiosity," he said. "I simply enjoy knowing who attends these events." That is understandable, especially when someone appears out of nowhere. Emily's expression remained unchanged. Everyone arrives from somewhere. A few nearby guests hid smiles behind their glasses. Nathan noticed. For the first time, the conversation was not unfolding entirely on his terms. His charm usually controlled the room. Emily's calmness disrupted that balance. She never challenged him directly. Yet somehow she refused to play the role he expected. "You seem very comfortable here," Nathan observed. "Should I not be?" Many people would feel intimidated. Emily glanced around the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Music drifted through the air. Snow continued falling outside. "It is only a room full of people," she answered. "That does not seem very frightening." Several listeners exchanged surprised looks. Nathan stared at her for a moment. Then he smiled again. This time the smile felt thinner, more calculated. "You are certainly confident for someone with no family name attached to her invitation." Emily set her glass gently onto a nearby table. Her posture remained relaxed. Confidence and family names are not the same thing. The sentence landed more heavily than she intended. Silence briefly settled over the small group. Nathan's companions had now moved closer. Some appeared entertained. Others looked uncomfortable. Emily sensed the shift in atmosphere. The evening was changing. Slowly. Almost invisibly. What had begun as curiosity was becoming something else. A test. And standing beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers, surrounded by strangers who measured worth through titles and influence, Emily Harper had no idea that the man questioning her would soon become the first person to underestimate her in front of the entire kingdom. Emily Harper sensed the mood changing long before anyone said anything openly unkind. The small circle surrounding her continued to grow as more guests drifted closer under the pretense of joining nearby conversations. Crystal chandeliers reflected golden light across polished floors while the orchestra played another elegant piece. Yet within this corner of the ballroom, the atmosphere felt increasingly different from the rest of the celebration. Nathan Sterling remained standing comfortably beside her, one hand resting in his pocket, the picture of confidence and social influence. Around him stood several friends and admirers who seemed eager to enjoy whatever direction the conversation might take. Emily recognized the pattern. She had seen it before in smaller gatherings, though never on this scale. Curiosity had transformed into scrutiny. Scrutiny was slowly becoming entertainment. "You still have not told us who invited you," Nathan said lightly. His tone remained pleasant enough to avoid criticism, but there was something sharper beneath it now. Emily met his gaze calmly. "Does it matter?" A few listeners exchanged amused looks. Nathan smiled. "In a room like this, everything matters." Emily glanced around the ballroom. Noble families laughed beneath glittering chandeliers. Couples danced near the center floor. Servers moved gracefully between guests carrying silver trays. It all seemed so distant despite being only a few yards away. "I suppose that depends on what people value," she answered. Nathan laughed softly. "That sounds like the kind of answer people give when they do not have a better one." Several nearby guests chuckled. Emily heard the laughter, but refused to let it affect her expression. Instead, she folded her hands gently in front of her and remained silent. Her calmness only seemed to encourage the audience forming around them. One young noblewoman stepped forward. "Are you visiting from another territory?" Emily shook her head. "No, then perhaps your family owns land nearby?" another asked. "No, business interests?" "No." The questions came faster now. Each answer seemed to create greater confusion. Or perhaps greater disappointment. Emily could almost feel people searching for an explanation that justified her presence. Some detail. Some connection. Some title. When none appeared, assumptions began filling the empty space. Nathan studied her for a moment. "You must admit," he said, "it is unusual." "What is?" "Someone attending one of the most exclusive events in the kingdom while knowing almost nobody here." Emily smiled gently. "Everyone starts as a stranger somewhere." A few people looked away. Others rolled their eyes. Nathan's smile tightened. The response had been polite, reasonable, difficult to challenge directly. Yet somehow it left him feeling as though he had lost a point in an argument he never officially started. Nearby, an older gentleman observed quietly from across the room. Unlike the younger guests, he seemed uncomfortable with the direction things were heading. He noticed the way Emily never raised her voice, never showed frustration, never attempted to impress anyone. The more composed she remained, the more determined some people became to provoke a reaction. Nathan stepped slightly closer. "Tell me something honestly." "All right. Are you enjoying yourself?" Emily considered the question. "I was." The answer landed with unexpected weight. Several listeners shifted uncomfortably. Nathan noticed. Was. Emily glanced around the circle that had formed. "The evening felt more peaceful before I became a mystery people wanted to solve." Silence lingered briefly. Not because her words were cruel, because they were true. A few guests lowered their eyes. Others pretended not to understand the implication. Nathan laughed again, though the sound carried less warmth than before. "You make us sound rude." Emily offered a small shrug. "I did not say that. You implied it. If you believe I did, perhaps there is a reason." The statement caused another wave of silence. Even the people who disliked her could not deny the dignity with which she spoke. Nathan felt irritation rising beneath his polished exterior. He was accustomed to controlling conversations. Emily refused to cooperate with the role he wanted her to play. She neither challenged him aggressively nor submitted to the social pressure surrounding her. She simply remained herself. And somehow that made everything more difficult. Across the ballroom, palace staff suddenly began moving with greater urgency. Advisors exchanged brief words near the entrance. Security personnel adjusted positions. Most guests remained unaware of the subtle changes. Emily noticed them immediately. Her heart lifted slightly. Alexander must be close. Nathan followed her gaze toward the entrance. "Expecting someone?" Emily's smile returned for the first time in several minutes. "Perhaps." Nathan noticed the change and misinterpreted it completely. "A friend." Emily looked back toward him. "Yes, the influential friend?" Several people laughed again. Emily simply nodded. "Very influential." The answer generated another round of amusement. Nathan shook his head. "Well, I look forward to meeting this mysterious person." Emily's eyes drifted once more toward the grand doors at the far end of the ballroom. Snow swirled beyond the glass entrance. Somewhere outside, a royal motorcade was pulling into the palace courtyard. And standing in a room full of people who believed they understood power, Emily quietly realized that within the next hour, every assumption surrounding her would begin to unravel. The atmosphere around Emily Harper continued tightening like a rope pulled one careful inch at a time. The laughter surrounding Nathan Sterling had grown louder, encouraged by the audience that now lingered nearby, pretending not to listen. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead while the orchestra played on, unaware of the small storm forming beneath the elegance of the evening. Emily remained calm. Her hands rested lightly in front of her. Her expression showed neither embarrassment nor anger. That composure seemed to frustrate Nathan more with every passing minute. He had expected defensiveness. He had expected excuses. Most of all, he had expected her to seek approval from the people surrounding them. Instead, she appeared completely uninterested in winning anyone's favor. "Your friend must be extraordinary," Nathan said. "After all, invitations to this event are not handed out casually." Emily nodded. "He is extraordinary." Several guests smiled at what they assumed was a romantic fantasy. Nathan noticed their reaction and decided to press further. "And where is this remarkable person tonight?" Emily glanced briefly toward the grand entrance again. "On his way." Convenient timing. More laughter followed. Emily simply smiled. The response only deepened Nathan's irritation. Nearby, several older guests had begun observing the conversation with growing discomfort. They could sense that something was shifting beyond harmless teasing. Emily had done nothing to provoke anyone. Yet, somehow she had become the target of the room's collective curiosity. Nathan stepped closer. You know what fascinates me? Emily looked at him politely. What? People who pretend status does not matter. The ballroom noise seemed to soften around them. Why is that fascinating? She asked. Because status always matters. He gestured around the room. Look at this place. Every person here understands that. Emily followed his gaze across the ballroom. Noble families. Business leaders. Influential names. Wealth displayed through jewelry, fashion, and confidence. Then she looked back at him. Those things may matter to some people. And not to you? Not in the way you mean. Nathan shook his head. That is easy to say when someone else paid for your invitation. A few guests laughed more openly this time. Emily remained silent. Her restraint somehow made the comment feel smaller than Nathan intended. The silence lingered. Nathan interpreted it as weakness. Tell me honestly, he continued. If your mysterious friend disappeared tomorrow, would anyone in this room even know who you are? Several people shifted awkwardly. The question felt unnecessarily personal. Emily lowered her eyes briefly before lifting them again. Perhaps not. Nathan smiled as though he had finally scored a victory. Then maybe you should appreciate how generous society can be when it allows outsiders into rooms like this. The comment landed heavily. Not because it was loud. Because it revealed exactly what he thought of her. A few nearby guests suddenly looked uncomfortable. Others watched with open fascination. Emily stood perfectly still. She could have responded with countless truths. She could have ended the conversation immediately. Instead, she chose dignity. I think generosity says more about the giver than the recipient, she answered softly. The words were gentle. Yet they struck harder than any insult. Nathan's expression hardened for the first time. Around them, several people exchanged glances. Emily had not raised her voice. She had not attacked him. Somehow she still held the moral center of the conversation. Before Nathan could respond, a palace attendant hurried across the ballroom carrying a message. Guests near the entrance began turning their heads. Advisors moved into position. Security personnel quietly adjusted their formation. The Alpha King's arrival was approaching. Emily noticed immediately. Relief warmed her chest. Soon this strange evening would settle. Nathan followed her gaze once more. Still waiting, he asked. Yes. You seem very certain. I am. Something about her confidence unsettled him. Without thinking, he reached toward her arm as though to stop her from turning away. Emily instinctively stepped back. The movement was small. No one was hurt. Yet her glove caught briefly against the edge of a decorative chair. The fabric slipped from one hand and fell softly onto the polished floor. For a moment, nobody reacted. Emily bent slightly to retrieve it. Then several nearby guests noticed what had been hidden beneath the glove. A ring. Simple. Elegant. Undeniably a wedding ring. Silence flickered through the group. Nathan stared at it. You are married? Emily picked up the glove calmly. Yes. Surprise spread across several faces. Nathan looked genuinely caught off guard. You never mentioned that. Emily slid the glove back on. You never asked. The answer generated a different kind of silence. Not amusement this time. Uncertainty. For the first time all evening, the crowd realized how little they actually knew about the woman standing before them. And as the massive entrance doors at the far end of the ballroom slowly began to open, the room was only moments away from discovering just how much they had underestimated her. The massive doors at the far end of the ballroom opened with slow ceremonial precision. Conversations faded almost instantly. The orchestra lowered its volume. Guests straightened their posture. Every eye turned toward the entrance as royal guards stepped into view beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers. Snow swirled briefly behind them before the doors closed once more. A hush settled across the room. Emily Harper felt her heartbeat soften. Nathan Sterling and the others around him instinctively shifted their attention toward the arrival. The atmosphere changed in a way that could not be explained. Power had entered the room. A royal herald stepped forward. His voice carried clearly across the ballroom. His Majesty, Alpha King Alexander Blackthorne. The announcement echoed through the hall. Hundreds of guests bowed their heads respectfully. Emily's smile appeared before she could stop it. Alexander entered with the calm confidence of a man who never needed to demand attention because attention followed him naturally. His dark formal attire reflected silver light from the chandeliers. His posture remained relaxed, his expression composed. Yet there was something different about him tonight, something more focused. Several advisors followed at a respectful distance. Noble families immediately moved forward hoping to secure a greeting. Others simply watched with admiration. Nathan straightened his jacket and adjusted his posture. Like everyone else, he hoped to make a favorable impression. Alexander acknowledged the room with a slight nod before beginning his walk through the ballroom. The crowd parted effortlessly. Conversations resumed in quiet whispers. Everywhere he moved, people smiled, bowed, and offered greetings. Yet after only a few steps, something unexpected happened. His eyes lifted above the crowd. He was searching for someone. Not advisors. Not nobles. Not influential families. Someone else. Emily recognized the look immediately. She had seen it countless times before. Alexander always searched for her first. Even in crowded rooms. Even after long separations. It was a habit neither of them had ever discussed. Nathan noticed the direction of Emily's gaze. "You seem very pleased to see the king," he said lightly. Emily nodded. "I am. Most people are." Nathan smiled. "Although I suspect your mysterious friend may be disappointed by the competition." Several guests laughed politely. Emily merely looked toward Alexander. She no longer seemed interested in the conversation. The Alpha King continued moving through the ballroom. Advisors attempted to guide him toward waiting dignitaries. He listened politely. Then something caught his attention. Across the room, near the winter rose display, his eyes found Emily. Instantly, the effect was subtle but unmistakable. His expression softened. Not enough for most guests to notice. Enough for Emily. Enough for the advisors who knew him well. One of them exchanged a quick glance with another. Neither said a word. Nathan remained unaware. "You never told us your husband's name," he said. Emily looked back toward him. "No, why keep it secret?" "Because it is private." Nathan chuckled. "Everything about you seems private." Around them, several guests continued watching. The wedding ring had changed the conversation. People no longer viewed Emily as merely an outsider. Now she had become a puzzle. A married woman attending one of the kingdom's most exclusive events alone. Calm. Confident. Apparently connected to someone important. Questions multiplied. Answers remained absent. Across the ballroom, Alexander had stopped speaking with a visiting ambassador. His attention remained fixed in Emily's direction. He could not hear the conversation. He did not know the exact words being exchanged. But he recognized something in her posture. The quiet patience she displayed whenever she tolerated difficult people. His eyes narrowed slightly. One advisor followed his gaze. "Is something wrong, Your Majesty?" Alexander remained silent for a moment. "Perhaps." The advisor looked toward the group surrounding Emily. His expression immediately changed. He recognized Nathan Sterling. He also recognized the audience forming around them. "Would you like me to intervene?" Alexander considered the question. Then he slowly shook his head. "Not yet." Back near the windows, Nathan continued pressing for answers. "Tell me one thing at least." Emily sighed softly. "What would you like to know?" Nathan smiled as though he had finally gained ground. "Who exactly is your husband?" Several guests leaned slightly closer. Even those pretending not to listen suddenly became interested. Emily lowered her eyes briefly before lifting them again. Her gaze drifted past Nathan, past the crowd, directly toward Alexander. For a brief moment, husband and wife looked at one another across the ballroom. Neither spoke. Neither moved. Yet the connection between them felt undeniable. Emily smiled. Warmly. Genuinely. Then she returned her attention to Nathan. "You will meet him soon enough." Around the room, guests interpreted the answer as another mystery. Another deflection. Another attempt to avoid specifics. Only Alexander understood exactly what she meant. And as he began walking slowly toward the group gathered around her, destiny took its first deliberate step toward the center of the ballroom. Alexander Blackthorne moved through the ballroom with calm, measured steps. The crowd parted naturally before him. Conversations faded wherever he passed. Guests lowered their eyes respectfully. Advisors followed several paces behind, careful not to interrupt whatever had captured the Alpha King's attention. Across the room, Nathan Sterling remained completely unaware that the direction of the evening had already changed. He still stood surrounded by curious guests, enjoying the attention generated by the mystery surrounding Emily Harper. "You will meet him soon enough," Emily had said only moments earlier. Nathan smiled at the memory. "Your husband must be a remarkable man if he inspires such confidence." Emily looked toward him with gentle amusement. "He is." Before Nathan could continue, a subtle movement rippled through the crowd. Heads began turning. Conversations stopped. One by one, guests stepped aside. Nathan frowned and glanced over his shoulder. His expression immediately brightened. The Alpha King himself was approaching. Excitement flashed through the group. Several noblewomen adjusted their posture. Young heirs straightened their jackets. Everyone hoped for acknowledgement from the most powerful man in the kingdom. Nathan quickly composed himself. This was an opportunity. A chance to make a favorable impression. Alexander continued forward without hurry. Crystal light reflected from silver details woven into his formal attire. His expression remained composed, impossible to read. Yet those who knew him well noticed something unusual. His attention never drifted. It remained fixed on a single destination. Emily. Nathan stepped forward as the king approached. "Your Majesty," he said with a respectful bow. What an honor. Around him, others quickly followed his example. Alexander acknowledged the greetings with a slight nod. Nothing more. Nathan waited for conversation. Praise. Recognition. Something. Instead, the Alpha King's gaze moved past him entirely, directly toward Emily. For a moment the ballroom seemed to disappear. The noise. The music. The crowd. None of it mattered. Alexander stopped in front of her. Emily smiled. The warmth in her expression immediately softened something inside him. "You made it," she said quietly. "I told you I would." Several nearby guests exchanged confused glances. The familiarity felt strange. Unexpected. Nathan forced a laugh. "It appears our mystery guest knows His Majesty." Emily glanced toward him. "Yes." Nathan smiled. A fortunate connection. The comment hung in the air. Alexander slowly turned his head. For the first time that evening, his full attention settled on Nathan Sterling. The effect was immediate. Nathan felt it before he understood it. Not fear exactly. Pressure. The kind that appeared when standing too close to enormous authority. Fortunate. Alexander repeated calmly. Nathan swallowed. "I only meant that not everyone has the opportunity to know the king personally." Silence followed. Emily remained perfectly still. Alexander's expression never changed. Yet the atmosphere around them felt different now. Several advisors had stopped nearby. Older nobles watched with growing curiosity. Something important was happening, though most could not yet identify what. Nathan attempted to recover. "Miss Harper has been keeping everyone guessing all evening." Emily lowered her eyes briefly. Alexander noticed. The small gesture told him more than any explanation could have. He had known her long enough to recognize when she was choosing patience over discomfort. "Has she?" he asked. "No one seems to know much about her," Nathan continued. "Not her family. Not her connections. Not even her husband." A few nervous laughs emerged from the surrounding crowd. They quickly faded. Alexander remained silent. His gaze shifted toward Emily's gloved hand, then to the wedding ring partially visible beneath the fabric. His eyes softened. Nathan followed the glance. Confusion touched his face. The silence stretched longer. Uncomfortable now. Guests shifted their weight. Some looked away. Others leaned closer. Every instinct told them they were standing at the edge of something significant. Finally, Alexander spoke. His voice remained calm, quiet. Yet every person nearby heard every word. "That is unfortunate." Nathan blinked. "Your Majesty?" Alexander looked directly at him. Because if you had known more about her, this evening might have gone very differently. The statement landed like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples of uncertainty spread through the group. Nathan's confidence faltered for the first time. Emily watched silently. Her heart beat a little faster. She knew what was coming. Alexander took one small step closer to her. Then he extended his arm. Not toward Nathan. Not toward the crowd. Toward Emily. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Hundreds of eyes watched from across the hall. Advisors stopped speaking. Even the musicians appeared uncertain whether to continue playing. Emily looked at him. Alexander offered a faint smile. The same smile he reserved for quiet mornings and private conversations. The same smile no one else in the kingdom ever truly saw. And as she gently placed her hand in his, the first shockwave of truth began moving through Blackthorn Palace. The moment Emily Harper placed her hand in Alexander Blackthorn's, the atmosphere inside the ballroom changed completely. It was not loud. It was not dramatic in the way stories often described dramatic moments. Instead, it felt as though the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. Conversations stopped. Glasses remained suspended halfway to lips. Musicians hesitated. Even the soft rustle of formal gowns seemed to disappear beneath the weight of a silence no one had expected. Nathan Sterling stared at their joined hands. His confident smile vanished. Around him, guests exchanged bewildered looks as they tried to understand what they were seeing. Emily stood beside the Alpha King with the same calm dignity she had displayed all evening. Nothing about her had changed. The simple blue dress remained the same. Her posture remained the same. Her gentle expression remained the same. Yet somehow she appeared entirely different now. Not because of who she was standing beside. Because everyone was finally beginning to see what had been there all along. Alexander looked at Emily for a brief moment before turning his attention toward the crowd. His arm remained extended toward her. Not possessive. Not performative. Natural. Familiar. The gesture of a husband who had held that hand countless times before. The realization spread through the ballroom like a wave. Several noble women covered their mouths in disbelief. Older guests exchanged stunned glances. Advisors watched quietly, aware that history was unfolding exactly as expected. Nathan blinked several times. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, his voice no longer carrying its earlier confidence, "I do not understand." Alexander's gaze settled on him. "Then allow me to help." The Alpha King's voice remained calm. He never raised it. He never needed to. "Emily Harper is my wife." The words echoed through the ballroom with astonishing force despite their simplicity. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then shock erupted through the room in 1,000 silent reactions. Eyes widened. Expressions froze. Guests looked from Emily to Alexander and back again, as if hoping reality might somehow change between glances. Nathan felt the color drain from his face. The sentence replayed inside his mind. My wife. Not a guest. Not an acquaintance. Not a distant connection. His wife. The woman he had questioned for nearly an hour. The woman he had quietly mocked in front of an audience. The woman everyone had treated as a curiosity instead of a person. Emily lowered her eyes briefly, not from embarrassment but from humility. She had never enjoyed attention. Alexander noticed and offered her a reassuring smile. The gesture only deepened the shock around them. Few people had ever witnessed the Alpha King look at anyone with such warmth. An elderly nobleman near the back shook his head slowly. My goodness, he whispered. The Queen's seat has been standing among us all evening. Nearby, several younger guests looked visibly uncomfortable as they remembered every assumption they had made. Every whispered comment suddenly felt much heavier. Nathan struggled to find words. I had no idea. Alexander regarded him quietly. That is becoming increasingly obvious. The response was not cruel. It did not need to be. Nathan lowered his gaze. For the first time all night, he seemed unsure of himself. Around the ballroom, people began replaying the evening in their minds. Emily's patience. Her kindness toward staff. Her refusal to boast. Her calm responses under pressure. The truth became painfully clear. She had never hidden behind power because she had never needed to. The strength everyone admired in the Alpha King had been standing quietly beside them all along in a different form. Alexander gently lifted Emily's gloved hand. The wedding ring beneath the fabric caught the chandelier light. "Some of you spent tonight wondering who invited her," he said. "Some wondered why she belonged here." His gaze moved across the room. No accusation. No anger. Just truth. The better question is why so many people believed she needed to justify her presence at all. Silence followed. This time it felt different. Reflective. Honest. Emily looked around the ballroom and saw expressions changing. Embarrassment replacing arrogance. Respect replacing suspicion. Understanding replacing assumptions. The room that had judged her only an hour earlier was beginning to recognize its mistake. Nathan swallowed hard. The weight of what had happened settled fully onto his shoulders. And as hundreds of guests stood frozen beneath the crystal chandeliers, one truth became impossible to ignore. The least important person in the room had never been Emily Harper. It had been the assumptions everyone carried about her. The silence that followed Alexander Blackthorne's words seemed to stretch across the entire ballroom. No one rushed to fill it. No one dared. Beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers, guests stood surrounded by the consequences of their own assumptions. Emily Harper remained beside her husband, her gloved hand resting comfortably in his. She felt hundreds of eyes on her, yet she carried herself with the same quiet grace she had shown from the moment she arrived. Nothing about her posture suggested triumph. Nothing suggested resentment. If anything, she appeared slightly uncomfortable with being the center of attention. That alone made the lesson even more powerful. Alexander slowly looked around the room. His gaze moved across noble families, business leaders, socialites, and influential heirs. The room that had once seemed so confident now appeared uncertain. "Tonight has revealed something important," he said calmly. His voice was not loud, yet every person heard it clearly. "Not about Emily." He paused. "About us." Several guests lowered their eyes. Nathan Sterling remained motionless. Earlier in the evening, he had been the most confident person in the room. Now he looked like a man reviewing every word he wished he could take back. Alexander continued. "Many people claim to value character, kindness, integrity. Yet the moment they encounter someone whose status is unknown, they begin searching for reasons to place that person above or below themselves." The ballroom remained silent. No one disagreed because no one could. Emily glanced toward the palace staff working quietly along the edges of the room. She noticed several of them watching. Unlike many of the guests, they were smiling. Not because of the revelation. Because they already knew the woman standing beside the Alpha King. They knew the person who thanked servers by name. The person who remembered birthdays. The person who treated every member of the palace with dignity. Alexander noticed them too. Some of the people who showed Emily the greatest respect tonight were those who expected nothing in return, he said. The statement settled heavily over the crowd. Nathan finally stepped forward. His voice sounded different now. Smaller. Honest. "Your Majesty." Alexander looked at him. "Yes." Nathan swallowed. "I owe her an apology." No one interrupted. Nathan turned toward Emily. For the first time all evening, there was no arrogance in his expression. "Mrs. Blackthorne, I judged you before I knew you. I assumed things I had no right to assume. I was disrespectful, and I am genuinely sorry." The room watched closely. Emily studied him for a moment. She saw embarrassment, regret. Most importantly, she saw sincerity. A gentle smile appeared on her face. "Thank you," she said. "That takes courage." The answer surprised many people. Some expected humiliation. Some expected revenge. Emily offered neither. Alexander's expression softened with pride. This was precisely why he loved her. Power had never changed her. Recognition had never changed her. Even now, when she held every advantage, she chose grace. Nathan lowered his head respectfully. Relief appeared in his eyes. Around the ballroom, the tension slowly began to fade. Guests exchanged thoughtful looks. Conversations resumed quietly. Yet the mood had transformed completely. The event was no longer about status or influence. It had become something deeper. An uncomfortable but valuable lesson. Alexander looked at Emily. Would you care to dance? A few guests smiled immediately. Emily laughed softly. You finally have time for a dance? I make time for important things. The warmth between them drew smiles throughout the room. The orchestra, sensing the shift in atmosphere, began a gentle melody. Alexander guided Emily toward the center of the ballroom. This time no one questioned her place there. The crowd stepped aside willingly, respectfully. As they moved across the polished floor, snow continued falling beyond the palace windows. The kingdom outside remained unchanged. Yet inside Blackthorn Palace, something had shifted. Not because an alpha king had exercised authority, because a woman had demonstrated dignity when dignity would have been easiest to abandon. Guests watched the couple dance beneath the chandeliers. Some admired the romance. Others reflected on their own behavior. Many would remember this evening for years. Not as the night a secret marriage was revealed, but as the night they learned how easily appearances could deceive them. Emily rested her hand lightly on Alexander's shoulder and looked around the ballroom one final time. Earlier, she had entered as a stranger. Now every person knew her name. Yet the truth that mattered most had never changed. Her worth had not increased because people finally recognized her. It had been there from the beginning. The only difference was that now everyone else could see it too.